Hello guys, today I have another guest. My guest today is Gabor Holch. He is an intercultural coach for executives, consultant, but also an author and speaker. Gabor, thank you for taking this interview and coming here and visiting us.
Thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here.
This is not another story.
Okay, so let's start with a bit of your background. Can you tell us and give more background of who you are and what do you do exactly?
So, as you said, I'm an intercultural coach for executives most of the time. Also do training, also do speeches. The way you have to imagine is that I'm trying to keep international executives from having their leadership methods and their leadership message get lost in translation. Because this is what a lot of times happens. I mainly work with large European companies that send executives to the Asia Pacific region, but recently I also started working the other way around with Asian executives being promoted into global positions and therefore going to Europe, going to the United States and other places to take up a position there. And then it happens to them exactly the same way as it would happen to a British or a German executive here. They are used to working in a certain way, they are used to the outside world and other people giving them certain kind of reactions, but then in a new culture it doesn't happen that way, and then they are wondering what's wrong. I'm helping them to figure out and to adjust.
I want to follow with another question, and then we'll go deeper and investigate more what we do.
Right.
But I want to start with a question that it's like origin story. Why you decided to came here in China, and when was that for you?
So part of the answer is that I have been in China for a very long time. So I arrived to China in 2002, and then I have been in China ever since, basically living here, doing half of my work everywhere else, so traveling an awful lot, but always being based here. So I'm going back to an earlier stage in my life when I answered the question why I came to China, and then the short answer, it was as a general interest in East Asian culture. I did a lot of things that were connected to this culture in sports, in studies, in all kinds of interests, and at one point I was just wondering, why am I still in Europe? At that point I quit my then job and then I came to China, and then China so far gave me enough opportunities and excitement to keep me here.
So obviously you formed yourself about the culture and so on, and then you saw a lack, mainly in the executive who were coming here and were facing starting with a culture, the culture that was like an unknown. So there was this lack of preparation. What's the main problem that executives come here and they'll have to lead either a Chinese a team or a mixed team, which could be Chinese or foreigners? What are the main challenges that they have and you help them with?
There is one basic challenge, is that people think that to move over to another country or another continent and start working is just a question of understanding how the new environment works. But it's not about understanding, because you are not just orienting yourself or aligning yourself to a new culture. Everything you do from the moment you wake up in the morning and open your eyes will go differently. So there is no place to go from there, so to speak. I mean, if you want to adjust, for example, if your company gets acquired by another company and then they put different core values on the wall, you have a different boss, then you have to adjust. But basically you are still doing the same thing. And when you get a little bit tired of hanging out with the new people and the new boss and working in the new software, then you always go back to the people you know, to routines that you know, and then you relax a little bit and gather your strength again to go out of the comfort zone. If a high-level executive moves over, let's say from Germany, the United Kingdom or Spain, to China or to Singapore or Vietnam or Japan, there is no such comfort zone left. Everything you do is new. Everything you do gives you different responses. It's a little bit like driving a car with the steering wheel on the other side.
So you have
You
to
are
adjust.
constantly going to have alarm bells ringing in your brain. So people overestimate how much they can do with just a little bit of adjustment, and they lose their confidence. When you lose your confidence as an executive, you start making bad decisions, and that's not good for the company and not good for you.
So basically, I guess you see some patterns, like the points where they lose that confidence, and I guess you help them to gain back the confidence, and you lead and steer the right direction those executives. What are the main patterns that you saw, and where they lack mainly? How do you help them?
Well, frankly, you have to imagine the kind of people that I work with. Usually they are sent to the Asia-Pacific region because they were quite successful back home.
Okay.
So they have the confidence and they believe it's going to be a couple of weeks of adjustments, and then they can go ahead and they maintain the same speed. They are going to redefine the way the business works. They are going to take it to the next level. They are going to hire people. They are going to train people. And then culture interferes with all of this. And sometimes, to be honest, the problem is not too little confidence, it's too much confidence. It's just being used to being right most of the time. Now let's say if you are a European executive, and most of the time I work with Europeans, you are a European executive in China or in Japan, then in Europe you know the legal framework, you know how society works, you know the psychology of the people that you work with. Then you take away this. And I even have, for instance, China, when you have been here for some time, you know it, there are executives who read up on Chinese culture, they read up on the Chinese legal system. But what they find here is not what they read in
So
a
the
book.
preparation in the books is not what they actually find in the field.
Yes.
That's
Exactly.
okay.
Yes, yes.
I can
And then again, in that case, it's a little bit like somebody mixes up the control panel. You press certain buttons, you expect certain reaction, you can get the opposite reaction.
I see. Going back to your story, what is the most important business lesson that you learned in doing business here in China? And what you have learned exactly? How you can convey that learning to the audience who wants to do business as well here in China?
I think the most important lesson that I learned about China is that before you come to China and you try to figure out what it is, or even if you have been in China for a short while, but you are just thinking about how to start working here, you are operating based on very simplistic and deliberately simplified information. Even let's say if you watch a 2-hour documentary about working in China, which is supposed to, let's say, an online course, or you read a couple of books, it is going to simplify China into a couple of sound bites, which have a tendency. Let's say if you have 5 sound bites, then one of them is always true, but in a different situation, another one is true. China is many things. China is many economies, it's many societies, many cultures. It very much depends on, you work for a French company in Beijing, you work for a Japanese company or a Chinese company in Shanghai. Your reality is going to be completely different. So what I always try to start from is first know yourself. Which kind of life would you like to live? And then, once you figure out what is right for you, then choose the adequate Chinese reality that can give that to you. So for instance, now we are in a shared workspace. It's for people who like being surrounded by people. There are glass walls everywhere, we can see people come and go. It's also, I can imagine, it's a fairly flexible way of working. Nobody tells you what to do, nobody breathes down your neck, nobody says, you have to be here at 9 o'clock in the morning. That's perfect for some people, it's absolute hell for somebody else. For those people who cannot function well in an environment like this, maybe they are supposed to work for a large company. But they have to figure out which aspect, which dimension of China can make them productive and happy. There are endless possibilities here, but to be honest, I mean, based on 17 years of experience, this environment can also grind people up. There are a lot of people who came here with enough brain power, enough resources, enough opportunities, and then
many challenges.
Yes, it's themselves eventually.
Going back to what is the
and then I would move on. And
Transition.
that was 17 years ago.
And that's, if I can interject.
Yeah, of course.
That's like the story that I hear over and over. People come here for their companies send them for, it could be 1 year, 2 year,
Yes.
and they tell me the story, which is over and over the same.
Yes.
Like, I now being here 10 years or 15 years. Sorry for
China, no, it's a perfect remark. I mean, China is the kind of party where you tell your friends, I'm just popping over there, hour and a half, and then I'm moving on. But when you arrive, you see the pool, you see the people, you see the drinks, and then you decide to stay.
Yeah.
And then you forget about yourself. So yeah, I mean, the language was the original part. So at that time, I was working as a junior diplomat, and I was interested in Asian opportunities, but they wouldn't give me any of those opportunities unless I have certain skills. And one of those skills is having lived in Asia. And at that time, I spoke basic Japanese, but just the language knowledge wasn't enough. So I came to China, and basically I learned Chinese almost full time. I got a job in a college where many of my teacher colleagues were happy to tutor me, so I took 3-4 hours of language training a year. And then to answer your question, I found the following thing. Again, you choose your ground, you choose the aspect of China that you're interested in. In certain one of these, basically speaking Mandarin is indispensable. Let's say in startup, I don't think you are going to get very far if you don't speak the language, because most of the resources, for example, government programs, most of the help, it goes to local entrepreneurs. So if you want to connect to those resources, you have to be able to speak to them, because in this respect, in terms of learning English or Russian or Chinese, or Japanese or whatever, China is becoming a little bit lazy. Now they can see that they have a lot of opportunities. Many of them are homegrown. There are R&D centers all over the world where you can basically work in Mandarin. So why make an awful lot of effort? If, let's say, a startup entrepreneur can put 2 hours into learning English or 2 hours into coding or doing marketing, they say, I will just do coding then. So in this world, it's absolutely indispensable. If you work for a large multinational, or if you work for a luxury company and your clients are globally globe-trotting, local and international, let's say rich people or people who are connected to a certain industry, then you can make a nice living here without speaking Chinese.
What I found interesting is what you mentioned in the startup world. You have to know Chinese. Yesterday, for instance, we were at this event. We were talking about how to raise funding in China. And at the end of the event, someone raised the question, it's like, how do you overcome the language barrier? Given that the fact that all the investors are Chinese, they're gonna have troubles to communicate with you if you're a founder, foreign founder, and you have to pitch to them. It's troublesome to do it in English, because obviously their English is not so good. And the speaker said, obviously, if you're in China, you have to put the effort into learn Chinese. If those people are going to invest in your company, how you're going to communicate with them? And if you are asking even them money to them, like, you have to know how to negotiate well. You can rely to a certain level with a translation, with someone who translates for you, or a mediator or something. But the best approach is to put some time, learn the language. And that's the example, like someone giving us yesterday, which was during this event.
To be honest, I don't agree on principle if you want to get anywhere in China, you have to speak Mandarin. Because first of all, speaking Mandarin, learning to speak Mandarin is a much more difficult job than, let's say, you come from Italy, I come from Hungary. If either of us went over to Brazil and had to learn Portuguese, or we went to go over to Indonesia and wanted to learn Bahasa, I mean, in 1 year, you can get there when you can have meetings, if you expose yourself. In Mandarin, forget that. It takes 2 or 3 years just to be conversational. Just that if you know how to ask something in the supermarket, you understand what they are replying to. So it depends. And another thing is that it also depends on industry. So take people who work in sales and marketing or media, for example. they are usually extroverted, chatty people who are comfortable with a wide social network. So even if they learn 100 words in Mandarin, they will start communicating.
Yeah.
And they will be accepted because they are charming and they have charisma. But if you look at startups, and a lot of startups are technology these days, typically many of those people are introverts and socially shy. If you look at very important industries like law, like pharmaceutical industry, many of those people are introverted. They are task driven. They are socially not so apt. So what is going to happen there is that they're not going to open their mouths, just they will keep learning Mandarin. They will put hours and hours in. They don't use it for 2 years. And then they start writing contracts in Chinese. So we also have to know who we are and what the requirements are.
Exactly. So it starts with yourself, exactly.
It does.
And the skill of speaking, as you mentioned, is primarily important. Just know a few words and you have to practice. And you have to put yourself out of the comfort zone and try to make mistakes. Because obviously when you're at the beginning, you're going to make mistakes a lot.
Yes.
That's actually the problem we are solving. We know that Mandarin is a language. There's studies that says 2,200 hours. Mandarin, Japanese, Korean, and some other 2 languages, it takes some amount of time.
Right.
Like most of, for the English-speaking people, basically, like for Europeans in general. And that's actually the problem that we are trying to solve with our technology.
Yes. And the question, or the issue that I raised just now, what you are doing that people can basically have a conversation with their phones. A lot of people who are socially shy, the majority of people in the world are introverted people. Actually, there are, just like in the world, there are slightly more women than men, there are slightly more introverts than extroverts. But extroverts are more visible. So that's why if you go on social media, you feel everybody's so confident and everybody's so social. Of course, because those are the people who create the noise. But let's say if you're a young person with a law degree or with a technology-related degree, or even it can be a research degree, you come to China, you want to be apt in Mandarin, you don't want to get out of your comfort zone. You definitely don't want to go to a party where everybody speaks Chinese. I made my first keynote speech in Mandarin in 2008.
Wow, how was it?
Which means, I had been learning Mandarin for about 5 years, 6 years at that time. I mean, I'm so grateful that they didn't record that keynote speech, because I would be horrified to see it. But I had the guts, because my comfort zone is fairly wide when it comes to these things. But there are people who don't even want to make a speech in their native languages. I was networking a lot with Chinese people, and of course, even now, if you are confident and you use Mandarin, Chinese people love it. I don't know if you knew that, but in terms of percentage of population, China has one of the smallest foreigner population in the world.
Yeah, it's like 0.01% of foreigners.
0.07, if we believe the official statistics.
Yeah.
You have to imagine that it's 0.07. Japan, which is a fairly close society as well, 1% of the population is foreigners. So there is a huge thirst in Chinese people to communicate with foreigners. You, with this appearance, or somebody with a foreign appearance, it can be from anywhere in the world. If you're walking in the streets, even Shanghai, to some people it's like a television show character.
Yeah.
Walking
People are
down
willing
the street.
to talk with you.
Exactly, but they are shy because one thing that you don't want in Chinese culture is look like a fool. If you cannot say something smart, just don't say anything. This is what Chinese parents tell to kids here. So if suddenly this foreigner starts speaking in Mandarin, this door opens up and absolutely fabulous things happen.
That's interesting. As I mentioned at the beginning, you are also an author and you write books. And as I mentioned, probably I know that you currently are writing a book. Can you tell us more? What is it about and when it's going to be published?
So actually, my consulting work and my blogging work is a kind of cycle that empower each other, because every time I sit down with a foreign executive and let's say provide a shoulder to cry on, or whenever I work with a Chinese executive or a Japanese executive who has global responsibilities, and Asian people can be quite frustrated with the European speed lack of interest in modern technology and all of those things, then it gives me a lot of good ideas about how to help those people who cannot afford a coach, but they can certainly afford to download an article from my blog or buy a book. And this is how I collected lots and lots of stories. I am more of a storyteller than an analyst. So the book that I'm working on now, it gives the reader an insight into the life of expat executives in China.
Can you give us one of those story insights?
Well, let's say we already...
As a preview.
Absolutely. At the very beginning, we already said that the challenges are much more formidable and they come from different places than you would expect. Most of the people just said, okay, teach me the table etiquette and a little bit of Mandarin. And I know that, Chinese people are all Confucians, right? There is this collectivist society. I will learn the basics and I will be good to go. And it's not like that, because there are an awful lot of challenges. So first of all, a lot of Chinese people that expat executives work together with, they are extremely competitive people. They are not these kind of Confucian, peaceful, harmonious people that you read in books. So a lot of Western executives, basically, they are just shocked by the ambition, the speed and the energy of the Chinese people they meet. Now obviously, 95% of the Chinese population is still a traditional, harmonious-minded population, but that's not the people that expat executives meet. They will meet the winners, the kind of people...
The gladiators, as Fully would call them.
Exactly.
Startups.
Those who competed since they were teenagers, they got good education, they got good jobs, they got good promotions, and now they have the privilege of working with a foreign executive. And they are tough people. I mean, they are not going to take the opinion of the boss at face value. They are not going to say yes to everything, and obviously China now encourages Chinese people to have the upper hand. This is one thing. And then there are all those million little annoyances, the air quality here, the limitations on internet. A lot of expat executives I coach are men, so they are happy chappies, they have a wonderful job, they travel extensively, but their family is at home. They are stuck on the 35th floor, the air is not very good, the internet is not very good. It's not so easy to socialize with Chinese people at the beginning. And I'm going to mention a lot of these little challenges, how they add up, and how some executives actually can crack under pressure. I'm even interviewing mental health experts who are dealing with foreigners, and how some of the most successful expats I knew deal with this, and they actually even turn it into opportunities for business and opportunities for personal growth.
Wow.
And I try to learn from them as well, because I have my own pressure.
It's ongoing learning, especially when you have to deal and interview people as well. And I guess in your job you do that quite often.
I do, yes.
The last question, what would you do if you had to compete with yourself? As you said, first you have to watch yourself. What would you do if you have to compete with yourself?
If I had to compete with myself in my own profession?
Yes.
I think on both sides, knowing my personality, because I work a lot with personality systems. And one of the things that I do is I look at personality analysis and I predict the most successful and the most disastrous business behavior that a person can do. So I think if I knew what I know based on this factor, then I would probably try to create some kind of synergy with myself rather than competing, because the kind of personality type that I come from, it's high energy, it's high vision, but it's also a little bit emotional.
So strategic cooperation rather than harmful competition.
I would say so, because the kind of entrepreneur that I am and the kind of communicator that I am, if you directly compete, that it can get emotional and that it can get a little bit ugly. So knowing what I know about personalities and assessments and different business models and all this can be translated into strategies, then when I approach an entrepreneur who has a similar style, then I say either try to work with this person or get out of the way. There is a lot of blue ocean in China. It's such an enormous market. It just reconnected with the rest of the world recently. In lots and lots of goods and services, there are entire white spaces in the map. There are people who have never met a coach in their lives. There are people who have never participated in a corporate training before. I mean, half of the trainings that I deliver in mentoring are for people who participate in the corporate training the first time in their lives. They saw it on TV, but they haven't been there. So we can imagine how much opportunity there is. If I see somebody head on who has my style and my strategy, and we cannot cooperate, I basically take a turn. I go like 10 miles to the left or right, and there is enough opportunity for everybody here.
Gabor Holch, where people can find you and when the book will be published?
Yes, there are many places to find me. I mean, if they want to find my blog, then they just Google my full name, because it's very easy to find me. Obviously, they can find me through you as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the book is in the making. It's going to be ready by the autumn. It's going to be published somewhere after the autumn, depending on the publishing house. And in the meantime, I cannot even tell you the final title, because it's under discussion right now.
Okay.
So it's just Gabor Holch at the moment. And I think if you want to find me,
We'll follow up.
yes, I will be visible enough, I promise.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the interview.
You too. Thank you.